I want to just thank you so much for being with us, but really also I want to thank the Reverends Aizaiah Young and Margaret Connolly for joining us today. I invite you all to the screen. They're inviting faith leaders into a transformative and lifelong process of letting go of these supremacist theologies and these care paradigms around mental wellness. This webinar is an introduction and an invitation that leads us into a two-part training in October for leaders who are wanting to become more informed of what it might mean for their communities. And we're going to chat more about that later in the webinar. Aizaiah, Margaret, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to ask you both to share, how is your soul today?
Well, thanks so much, Reverend Ellie. It's really a delight to be here with you all. I'm really grateful for this space, and I've been a fan of Nurture the Soul, so I'm real happy to be engaging in this way. Yeah, my soul today, I'm based here in the upper Midwest in central Minnesota, and so some of you on the call may be aware of some of the recent events that have unfolded around gun violence in the last 24 hours at a local school, and so definitely carrying some of the weight and heaviness from that experience. And also in feeling that really grateful for a space like this where we can talk about the importance of our mental health care practices, about caring for one another in community, and supporting this time. And so I'm grateful for the chance to be here.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm glad Aizaiah said that at Dr. Young. I don't know what we want to be formal today. I think my soul is happy because I get to see faces I know and the recent events. I'm out of the country right now. So being around a space that's full of joy, and the purpose of being here is to learn and gather and be in community, and then witnessing what is happening at home. It has a lot to do with, I guess, why we're here today, and a lot of how we're opening up. I was tossed in between two ways of opening up today, and actually have it as a resource for everybody when we're done. But realizing that we all sit in spaces that may be disinherited at this moment, and so we share in that, and we also share in joys. So I guess Frankie Beverly would say it best. You know, there's joy in this pain.
Yes.
In the sunshine and rain. So we're all here really together.
Yes. Amen, Margaret. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that, both of you, your reflections and sharing how your soul rests today. So I appreciate that. I think, Margaret, you're going to lead us into a meditation. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So I have in recent events, because I had both of them prepared. And again, if you like this resource, I've also shared this with Reverend Ellie. If people want that, we can make sure you all get it today. And so, but I think the one I'll go with, since we started out, both of them are listed. I'm glad you asked the question about how our heart space is, and noticing that we're going to talk about something different and how we can bring that into our spiritual spaces, into our church spaces. And so just finding spaces just to be connected. So I'd like to offer to you all a meditation today. It's a guided exercise around working through self-compassion over struggle and pain. And if you are in a space where you can be uninterrupted, moving away from distraction, moving away from things that may pull you out of just being with yourself, I invite you to do that. And as we do this is a two-part meditation that's guided. The first part may feel a little hard. And I hope the second part can bring you joy. And so first I ask you just to recall something that may be difficult or challenging. Some of you may have that right in front of you, and some of you may have to look for that. And if possible, softening your gaze and closing your eyes in this space that's uninterrupted. And hold the situation in your mind for just a moment. As you hold it, notice how you're responding to that situation. Notice what's coming up around the stress, emotional discomfort in your body, or even the relive of that struggle. As you notice the struggle, as you notice the discomfort, I invite you to acknowledge it, not run away from it. Notice the moments where the hurt may increase or decrease. Notice the stress that you may have to examine or the pain. And notice if you need to have a verbal moment of ouch, this absolutely hurts. Recognize that stress, struggle, or the experiences of suffering are actually a part of our life. And that is what links us to our humanity. And as you do that, don't allow that understanding to overwhelm you. Know that's how we all are connected. And in that understanding of connection, remember that you're not alone, that we all have struggled. And that struggle touches everyone's life. Update your thoughts in your mind. The suffering does not mean that you're bad, does not mean that you are worthless, does not mean that you're being punished and that you are alone. Notice how that update lands in your emotional system. And now, as you still hold the space that may be uninterrupted, and your eyes may be closed or your gaze softened, I ask you to place your hands over your heart. Take in a few deep breaths. Notice what you're taking in. Notice what you are releasing out. And notice as you synchronize with your breath, the tension that you may be holding in your body. And notice how it may release. May you have relax. As you exhale, notice the stress that may be dissipating. Notice the pain that may be relieving. And notice and feel the gentle touch and the warmth of your own hands resting over your heart and on your chest. Feel the warmth, the comfort, the kindness of the light in your own hands building and spreading to your heart. And as this light spread, allow it to go to the heart that's behind the heart of your parts, the heart of the pieces of you that have not been damaged, that have not been harmed, and that have experienced healing. Notice as that healing gently flows. Notice as it comes from your hands to your heart. And as it spreads from your heart throughout your whole body. Notice how your compassionate warmth may lead to calm, maybe some curiosity, courage, any positive feelings that you may be having at this time. Measure with that warmth, that healing, that light that flows from your hands to your heart, to your very being. Ask that you be with yourself and tell yourself what you need to know or what you need to feel right now to update that you can experience kindness. You can experience it even from yourself. For those that this may be new or a shock, you may even need to verbalize. Give yourself permission that you can be kind to yourself. And when that feels well, I invite you to bring yourself back into the space. Bring yourself back into the physical spaces that you're in. And bring that healing with you and that reminder that I can be kind to myself.
What a gift. Thank you so much, Margaret. Wow. Like I'm an embodiment practitioner and often don't give myself the time to check in. So thank you for that. Thank you very, very much. Amen. Amen. Well, it seems like we should be slow moving into some of the questions that I have for you all. But I think it's relevant if I may give a quick story. I got to be an interim pastor for a church where their pastor went on sabbatical, and I had asked that pastor before I stepped in. I said, "How does the church do with silence?" And she said, "Oh, they don't." And so they inquired a little bit more about why I asked that question. And I said, well, I've been taking these somatic journey um, classes and certificate programs and moving more towards understanding the spirits, the journeys that Jesus took into the wilderness to get away from the people, to get permission to be away from the people. Um, and they were like, well, that seems very trendy, right? So, with that, I'm curious, in your work, what have you seen trend-wise around mental wellness and its relationship to religion and spirituality? And how has it perhaps informed and influenced the path that brought you here to us today?
Well, I guess I'll go first. What I have seen around trend is quick fix. Um, and I don't know if that goes along with how people have access to mental wellness. And quick fix and saying that if I could get like 6 sessions, can we be done? But I like doing the meditation I did because Deepak Chopra reminds us that's how we connect in our humanity. I can feel your pain. And so it isn't a 6 session done moment, but it may be a revisit or it may be maintenance. And giving ourselves permission to be mentally well, emotionally well, and not suppress them. But in recent times, it's been how can I get through it or how can I get over it is normally what I hear as a licensed therapist so that I can just get back to everyday life. And so that's a trend that I'm seeing more and more is how to get over something versus the invite to be with.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. And Reverend Margaret appreciating just the meditation offering as well. Just really a gift to feel the fullness of our human experience, and kind of how that unfolds. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, which is probably not a new trend, but it's been ongoing the last few years, has been related to the mental health of young adults in particular, ages 18 to 35. And um, there's been quite a number of experiences that young adults have had to work through. If we talked about the pandemic, talked about social political realities, collective traumas, the age of increasing information and acceleration of information, and it's really difficult to process and metabolize so many things that are always thrown to us. And so people can feel, even though we have more connection through some of these technologies, disconnected from themselves, from others, from checking in. And so I think that's a real important thing to look at. And the role that communal care plays in that is really significant. And so having conversations within our congregational context, our local community context about how we're checking in and looking out for one another is so vital. And I'm particularly thinking about not just generally young adults, but also some of our more vulnerable populations right now, migrant populations in the United States context, thinking about just the different responses that many of us are on the front lines for, and how we're really wanting to take holistic and communal approaches. And so that's a real important part to mental health, and that we continue to advocate where we can and practice that where we can. So I just wanted to lift up that group in particular. And then the only other piece I wanted to mention was some of my work with my partner, who's a ordained disciples minister, around parents and caregivers of young children in particular. And of course, a lot of the research shows that young children who experience secure attachment and connection to parents or caregivers, that's one of the most significant factors that can contribute to long-term mental well-being. And so as we think about not just how our kids are doing, but how our parents and caregivers are doing in relation to our children, that is a huge challenge and also opportunity we have for kind of long-term mental wellness. So.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing the youth perspective into this as well. One of the things that I heard when Margaret was leading us through that meditation is the recognition of the feeling of loneliness, of punishment, right? They had said punishment and then loneliness or being alone. And then towards the end of the meditation, inviting us into that being courageous and being curious, right? That positive thing. And I think really, I think somebody said it in the comments, that invitation to be over versus with, right? To examine the being, oh, it's quick like this instead of us being with something. But I loved being invited to remember that pieces of us can exist outside of the harm, right? That we have pieces of us that while our whole selves are responding to a certain way, that there are still little pieces of us that can be um, unharmed, that are tender. And so I think that brings me to thinking a little bit about what do you imagine healing? And this is the easiest question I've ever asked anyone, so I'm sure y'all are going to come up with the answers like that, right? But what does healing look like in our world today? Like what I know you all come from a specific practice, and we'll get into that specific practice in a little bit. But what are some of the things that you can recommend for us? To look and pay attention to the healing that is happening or could happen, and how do we get there? How do we be a mentally well world? See, I told you it was easy. Sorry.
I'm gonna throw it at Aizaiah, but I think can we bounce with this answer? That was huge. The last part. How can we be a mentally well world? The world part is. Ah, I don't know if I have an answer totally for the world. I can say when, and this isn't me thinking individualistic. It is me thinking about an individual. And when I can be concerned, when I can be motivated towards my own wellness, then I can bring that wellness back to my community. And then they too can feel or see or have example of what does it look like to move in mental wellness, not mental perfection, not in a space where things won't happen, where human life happens. I mean, Matthew 19 gives us a depiction of a conversation Jesus is having, and kids are just there. And we miss that in that whole text, because even the disciples are like, he says, bring the kids to me. And they're like, no, it says they rebuked him. So, but life is happening in that moment, right? Like they're talking about divorce, they're talking about, sexuality, they're talking about everything in this moment. And so, but in the moment of wellness, Jesus offers, hey, even let the kids be a part of this conversation, even let the community be. And we see that throughout the Gospels when it comes down to moments of miracle or wellness. When I look at the miracles now, I see moving into wellness. The community is there. And if I can give you an example of wellness, if I can help a woman stand up straight, if I can help a man who is blind see, and it not be done right the first time, it had to be a repeat of the mud on the eye. Like, if on a boat when everybody's scared, we can come and see together and I can say, you got the same faith, then I think that's an invite to a communal wellness, which I think is what Aizaiah was talking about, which can then lead to a possible world wellness, because then we can start to be light for one another. Now, bounce it to Aizaiah.
Yeah, well, thank you for this invitation to consider together how we can support one another in this movement towards wholeness, for wholeness, of wholeness. And I do feel like movement feels good for me in to say that life is alive, which is obvious, but life is alive. It's on the move, and life, the only constant is change, right? And so really, to me, wholeness is and mental wellness is about how we move through the changes that are happening inside of us, are happening in our embodied personal experience, but also, of course, all the communities that we're part of that are connected to us, right? Our spiritual communities, our workplaces, our households. I'm talking about the ones we move through, the grocery stores, the laundromat, right? Like, to really connect to that life aliveness in our daily experience, to me, makes kind of wholeness contagious. And that wholeness isn't an arrival at a certain place or at a certain transcendent experience, but it's more so a kind of deepening of connection to ourselves and others. And so that's an ongoing, never ending, I think, eternal invitation. And so we can just taste of it right here and now as we come together and we're listening to each other's stories. We're listening to what's emerging inside for ourselves, and we're able to witness that in one another, and to mirror that where we can, to invite curiosity, as Margaret was mentioning. So for me, I feel like that piece of being open to the change is a real part of wholeness. And so that piece is difficult, and that's why we need each other, because there's going to be moments where I'm going to feel like I can flow with a certain change in a more spacious capacity, and then there's moments I'm not. And so when I turn and I see my neighbor and I'm leaning in next to him to kind of hold me in a moment, I feel like that's the movement of wholeness that we want to cultivate. And so where different cultural wisdoms come into play, where different spiritual traditions come into play, where different practices of knowing oneself and being present to oneself and our relations, we can't afford to take a monocultural perspective on this. And so this question of mental wellness is very personal to me, and very much an invitation to want to get to know others and kind of how they're doing and what's working for them, where some edges are, so we can find that support. And so that feels really true. And I just want to say this last part, which is for right now, which is to say that part of what Ellie, I think you were naming about this place inside of us that exists, that is damaged forever, this kind of what I like to think of as an ontological blessedness, right? That who we are and every being at its core, the true reality is one of blessedness. And so we go through lots of things in this life, but how we can find moments and ways to reconnect to who we truly are and what can ever be taken from us. I think it's those kinds of experiences that really are felt and resonate, even though they're experienced differently within others, that then create more possibilities for this movement of wholeness.
Yes, I love that. And I think Isaiah, that's like a great transition to thinking about, one of the things that I have done is if I'm going to recommend and suggest, what is it that we were told? Do as I say, not as I, or do as I say, not as I do, right? I know there are some people in this room that have heard that. Do as I say, not as I do. I want to make sure that the people I'm in community with are doing the things that they can to care for themselves. And if they aren't, how can I, be in support of that, right? And so with that, what is the one perhaps practice in your own life that has helped you in your healing journey? And like maybe even like what Margaret was alluding to earlier, how's it helped or how is it related to your spirituality or your understanding of this connection between mental wellness and religion and spirituality? What's that one practice?
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about a kind of major practice that both Margaret and I share with internal family systems, but without going down that road just quite yet, one very practical thing for me and something I've taught in seminary context, and I try to encourage in every context that I can, is writing or voice memoing one's experience. And basically, it's just a way to really lovingly as possible, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it's lovingly, but to be real with your own experience. And there's no uh, impositional way that's supposed to go. People have different ways they can share their own experience or lead into it. But I think the more that we can, at least for me, the more that I have taken time to actually write about some edges in my experience and to ask a question and to begin to articulate, here's what I'm sensing, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm moving with, here's where I feel really stuck and I'm just upset. I could say other words on the call, but I'm feeling that. And so it's not quite journaling to me in a certain way. It's more of a kind of, and maybe you could call it that, but it could be micro, but taking time to actually digest and metabolize my experience. For me personally, that has really helped. And then the next level to it, why it's really great in groups when certain things are set up well is when you're able to share certain layers of that with others who will witness in a compassionate sense can be very, very powerful and profound. And so that's more of has to be really intentional and facilitated, of course, that aspect. But I just wanted to say more of the writing, the spiritual autobiographical way that you might connect to your experience. You might start by reflecting on a song that spoke to you, an experience in nature, a wisdom from a mentor, a trusted ancestral presence that you connect to, and like just deepen into like what was that, right? So it's not just like you're just experiencing your way through it, but you're kind of able to kind of deepen a presence towards that, and then from there it kind of can deepen your own insight to your experience. And so for me, that's where the mental health and the spiritual perspective kind of really touch each other for me, and it's a practice that's real important to me.
I guess for me, I'm becoming more of a writer. I have friends. I know he's gonna giggle. That push. Look at both of you smiling. So the push of of writing this down. I've been finding myself doing a lot of verbal note taking. So it's a lot of. I hope nobody ever finds my phone. It's a lot on, and 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 I have my own therapist who understands, that I have these two sides of a coin. Like I am a therapist, so I respect the art of therapy, the craft of therapy. But I also walk in not a religious space, but very spiritual space. And my therapist just happens to understand that. And in that, and in time, learning to build an ethic of compassion and love, and leaning more into that space, and not just love for people and love for the earth, but I actually had to start with an ethic that built compassion and love for myself. And so, what does that look like to have self compassion? And that is still building and growing. But like I said, over the last 4 years, it's been something that allowed me to be with all that has happened that I can manage and not allow it to overwhelm. And the more I grow in that, the more I find my connections become healthier. I won't say pure, but they become healthier. and I'm able to see in a clear state, how do I get to move and be with myself first, and then how do I get to move and be with others? And it gives me a lot of permission to just be Margaret. So I love it.
We love it too. Thank you both for that. You know, in your work, I've gotten to know your work, both of you. It was August of 2024. Or no, July of 2024, right? Or maybe September, who knows? It was the TFAM, it was the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries Leadership Conference. I think September of 2024, I think. Who knows? It was then, and I was just blown away. The reason why I can't remember the date is because I was just blown away that the Fellowship of Affirming Ministry spent the entire day talking about mental wellness in our faith settings. And I have been following you all ever since. I don't want to use the term stalking, but I've been really wanting to just get so much of your information out into the world because it's so vital and so important. And I know that your approach is a little different, right? In regards to you're influenced by something called internal family systems. And both of you have enlightened me a little bit about what internal family systems is and how you both came about seeing the potential and possibility for IFS in religious settings. And so, can you help inform those who are joining us today that may not know about internal family systems? Like, what is it? And then how does it impact our well-being of our communities and congregations?
So um, I'm trying not to say it so heady. Internal family systems is an invite to see all of the emotions, all of the things that may come up, all of the reference that it would use inside of the models, the parts of us that come up, that are present with us, to be in relationship with those parts. The overarching goal of the therapeutic model is that we build what is called a self to part relationship. In spaces where I teach most, it's where the core of who I am, that deepness that hasn't been harmed. I think when I first started using this model, I had to be like that deep that has cried out to deep that hasn't felt that pain, is able to come back and meet with those pieces that have been protecting, taking care of, managing my life, or distracting me from something. Building relationship, not to get rid of it. How do I move in concert with myself? And so with that, I also get the space and in that joined movement to look at what has pain or what has been wounded or what has been hidden so that I can just get back to life. So this model puts us in a position not to jump over anything or to run away from anything. Actually sit down with the essence of who we are and build relationship with all of the pieces that have shown up to create mask or to create who we have built ourselves to be, or to hide those little ones or those wounded pieces of us that are embarrassing, or I can't let people see that. That's too vulnerable. And so what I found, I almost treat this like a spiritual practice, but even working in aspects of my community, it's been a beautiful gift to offer that I can gather myself and remember myself, and see me from all angles and know that I am good. There's no part of me that is bad. I am good and God created me good. So that is how I use the model.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to that other than to say that what I've really enjoyed about it, being someone whose background is my father's Chinese Malaysian, my mother's Mexican American, and both kind of immigrant household experiences, and the first in their families to partner with someone outside of their cultural context. And so my whole life has been kind of a journey into holding both of these realities together within my own experience and wondering how they dance together. And so one of the things that IFS really helped me to do personally was to say that there's multiple aspects to my own experience, my lived experience, that might have different knowledge and wisdom and ways to allow me to move forward and support me. And so the spiritual part is how to harmonize, how to listen in such a way where the different parts of myself can be enriching and can be, instead of polarized and at war, which is our typical, can be a typical way we experience our own multiplicity, is like one part of me wants to go do something, another party wants to do something, and I'm feeling really polarized. And so internal family systems, the model really provides a way to connect to these multiple aspects. And for me, culturally, it's been a real beautiful thing. And because it's so emphasizes this wisdom inside all of us, it's radically different than a lot of therapeutic models where the mental health practitioner is kind of the expert on high and is diagnosing and is telling someone else, well, here's what's wrong with you, here's what you have to do, here's how we should treat this. And internal family systems is really more of an accompanying presence to open up this wisdom in one's own experience as a way to allow someone else to kind of sense that, to connect to their own, what their own needs are. And so it's really not about being an expert, being the one who knows the answers in any kind of way, but really the best thing we can do as practitioners is really offer that curiosity and compassion, which we've talked about, so that a person can again touch into that wisdom inside. And I think that's a real radically different way of approaching the healing process that I've really appreciated.
Yeah, and so many of you, I know my ex-wife used to say that if she had to have done her formal education program over, she became a physician assistant, she would have done the nurse practitioner model, because for her, being a physician assistant meant you treated the disease. Being a nurse practitioner was you treated the patient, right? And so I hear that in a little bit resonating with you. Y'all start with the positive as opposed to doing the negative, right?
Yeah, so the beauty of the model is that it's non-pathologizing. So what that means is we don't come in to throw a diagnostic or a diagnosis on anyone. I believe that this model can be used by anybody that's sitting in a space of practice. And so because it isn't trying to label someone, it isn't trying to say, oh, this is the problem, this is what's wrong with you. So therefore, it's not moving to a place of fixing anyone, because it's not calling for anything to be wrong. It is asking that we pause, see whatever that may look like, and take the time to build relationship, the things we push to the side or what we haven't paid attention to or how we haven't been present for ourselves. And then how do we do that in a space where we can invite spirit in, we can invite God to be a part of this process and start to harmonize with ourselves again. And often life is so busy, life is going so painful that we don't get to stop and just be kind. We don't get to stop and just say, I wonder, how do I bring myself back together and see how all of this is moving inside of a blessing or moving inside of a space that's going to push me into my next level, into where I'm supposed to be. We don't often get to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, and I want to invite folks, we have two questions in the Q&A. I'm going to ask those in a little bit here. So if you do have a question for Margaret or Aizaiah, please use that Q&A feature at the bottom, a little dialogue bubble with a question mark in it. But before we get to those questions, I do want to let folks know, as a reminder, that we are going to be hosting a two-part training in October on this. And so I want to know if Margaret and Aizaiah, if you could plant some seeds on what they might expect or anticipate in these two trainings that are coming up.
Oh, well, I can take a run first at this and say that it will be a two-part training, 3-hour sessions each time. So it'll be a time for some plenary, some teaching, definitely a lot of group discussion, and most importantly, practice on oneself, because the basis of internal family systems is really experiencing for oneself first and foremost this your own wisdom within. And so we'll be inviting space for folks to explore that. And to be able to listen into that place inside their own experience through this model. And I'm really glad that Reverend Margaret and I, one of the things we love to do when we work on this together is also introduce different contemplative and mystic teachers that also resonate with this approach. And so the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman is one of the major influences who talks about, in his own words and way, we think, about what some of this practice is inviting us into. And so we'll get to explore some of those luminaries and social mystics that have brought in more of this affirmation of the depth of our experience, the richness of our experience, and ways we can be present to that for ourselves. And then as we taste that, to learn some techniques and skills to offer that listening presence to others. And so that's a little taste. Reverend Margaret, what did I miss?
I don't think you missed anything. I'm just going to end it with, it's going to be an invite for you to form a community of self and then offer that back to your communities that are external. So I hope you join us. It's going to be a good ride.
Yes, and we have just limited registration this first time around, but this will not be the last time that we host these trainings with these two brilliant humans and souls. But I will say that what my role at the national setting is to help congregations imagine what it looks like to move um, into community spaces beyond buildings. And I was sharing with folks before the webinar started that there's a big portion of me that says now is the time, right? I mean, yesterday was the time, but now is the time for us to get involved and so on and so forth. But if we continue to move in the ways that we're familiar with, the ways that it has always been done, then we will continue to harm people. And in order to do really good work outside of our congregations and our houses of worship is to really start with the healing of ourselves, which is why this model appeals to me so much. And so at the national setting, I know for a fact with having conversations about what does mental wellness look like, we have a whole staff that is designed to help congregations move forward in thinking about what does mental wellness look like for you and for your church community? So this is just another approach. This is just another way to say that we want to be able to resource you all in whatever way seems best for you and your communities, and to build this network of support. We have a mental wellness summit coming up, our clergy wellness summit coming up, where we're hearing from people who are doing the work around clergy wellness to say, how is it that we are caring for clergy right now? And then how are we caring for their spouses and their family? Let's not forget, it's not just the clergy who are the folk. And then also, let's not forget about our lay leaders, the folks who may not have gone through the typical discernment call, but have stepped up because they've heard the call. And so, how do we care for them? So this is something that here at Nurture the Soul, at our faith info team, at our EFA team, these groups are moving to say we value this, we know it's important, and how do we implement it in practical ways. And so this two training opportunity is just one of many. They will not be recorded, just so you know. It is a live only participation. If you can't make it, unfortunately, you will miss it. But that's okay. We'll have other opportunities. And so just wanted to say that, to know that I know that, saying for myself here at the national setting, we care very deeply for the people who are showing up in our pews, and we care very deeply about the community it is that you serve. And it starts with gleaming some brilliance from folks like this. We had our first question come in a little while ago, and it said, can you speak on burnout and the toll on mental health that small church leaders often face? How can we continue to cultivate a culture of mutual care and authentic connection in our churches when the majority of the congregants come from a background that ingrained being reserved about their inner self, not allowing themselves to be intimate? Great question. Another easy one for you.
Yeah, I mean, no real ultimate solutions to offer here, but one thing that arises for me in this really important question, what I heard around um, just just those who might be less familiar with sharing of one's inner life and one's inner self. There could be lots of reasons for that, of course, personal, intergenerational, cultural, social, right? And so it'd be really hard to really give one response, but generally speaking, just as a way to say that the arts music, stories that is not necessarily their personal stories, but sharing stories, listening to stories, and storytelling traditions. I think these are all ways of getting to open up some of these more inner aspects of our experience that if we don't feel as comfortable personally sharing that, right? Or we're working with people who don't feel as comfortable personally sharing that, there are other avenues to invite these components in. And so, like I could say for myself, I lived through a really intense near-death experience in 2018. And one of the things that was most supportive for me was actually an audio album called Sanctuary, The Healing Path, where somebody else was telling their own story to music about kind of walking through their own suffering and trauma. And so I didn't have language in that moment, right, to be able to share what was going on. It was just a real horrific experience. But having and listening to others share tidbits of themselves through other forms, not just, the word-based kind of side, but through the arts, through the music, was really transformative for me. And so those may be ways to open some of this up in different kinds of spaces to invite some more reflection on that.
And just to add, I'm going to piggyback off the last thing that Aizaiah said. Like, we are storytellers. Humans are storytellers. And so what does it look like to be authentic in telling your story? That may look like holding someone's silence. For those of you who work with leaders in your church, it may look like being able to be with them as they hold their own story. So I'll say I have a lot of silent sessions in my office. I work with pastors and congregation leaders, and so it's a lot because they have been taught I can't express, I can't say, I can't speak to this experience. They are sitting in spaces of fear, not necessarily around the congregation, but what's the fear of my story getting out? And that fear, is hard. And so offering that, and if they're sitting in spaces of burnout and you see that, the offering of this genuine, what does it look like to say, hey, we see you, and we know that you may need a break. And so some of that leads to that self-care offering to our pastors, to our leaders, because sometimes they've never been offered that, including from themselves. They don't know what that sounds like. And so they engage in behaviors, again, that are protective behaviors. They may look extreme, but some ways to figure out how to take care of themselves versus what if I could just offer you another way? What would it look like to sit with yourself for a while and give somebody else an opportunity to take care of this responsibility? These aren't your sheep. So I have to say that to pastors sometimes, like, you have a responsibility here that is true, but the true responsibility is to yourself first. Even sitting in the text, like, in order to follow one of the commandments of Christ, and give us but two in the Gospels, from my understanding. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. But one is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. The crux of that is taking that time to love yourself. And often congregations aren't offering that. And what would it look like for you to take that back to your pastor, your leader, your lay leader, and say, I wonder what would it look like for you to sit in love and compassion for yourself for a minute? That's the beginning of how to work through some burnout, because sometimes I can't receive it, but the offering's on the table.
Yeah, I love that. One of the tattoos that I have here on my shoulder says, to love your neighbor as God so loves you. Because I had a hard time. I did not love myself at all. And I've had a lot of people be like, "Oh, you got that verse wrong." And I'm like, "I know I got it wrong, but but I wanted my neighbor. My neighbor deserved God's love, not the way that I was loving myself, right?" And so for me, it serves as a reminder of what does it mean, especially as somebody who was a single parent, who was an educator and now a pastor. It's like it's always about loving the other people that at some point I needed the pandemic to happen so I could realize that it was okay to, one, say no, two, to be alone, and three, to encounter death in a way that had me be able to sit and go, okay, what does it mean for us to be in these moments, right? And what does it mean for me to say I care about people, but yet I'm not working on myself, right? And there was another question that came through that said, there are people who cannot perceive a piece of themselves as not damaged. And while I love the internal family systems as a therapy. I wonder, how does it work in a broken hospital system, in a system where you see kids and adults maybe not understanding or perceiving that there are pieces of them that aren't damaged? What is some advice?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think this is probably some of the hardest work of internal family systems. And it's the work of removing our agenda. There are people who may come and not be open. And that doesn't mean we try to pry them open. We don't try to force them open. There is no perforated space on the can to pop it open. Else, you're going to get a shaking up can and it's going to go everywhere. What we can do around it is give them time. This is where stories are really important. And as I work with internal family systems, I've been working with this for like 6 years. I often have to invite people that I invite to this model. It's not a matter of what you know and what you think you're about to find out. Check that out. But it's really about what the person in front of you is about to find out about themselves. And it may come through the story. And so, again, we are all storytellers. What does it look like to sit with your own story? And that's what I offer to my clients. That's what I offer to individuals that I work with in group. How can you sit with your own story? And then that's how we start to move into, there is a space that hasn't been hurt because I'm finding it in my story. I do remember when 6 years old actually wasn't bad, even though that's when the pain happened. I do remember the Christmas, so I do remember. I found things that are just fascinating, like little mini miracles, even for myself as I use this work. Like my mom one day sent a bunch of pictures of me between the ages of 5 and 6 before a lot of damage happened at 6. And man, I remembered all of the joy and the happiness. And my grandmother was in the pictures, and my aunts and my cousins. And those are spaces that aren't hurt. Those are spaces that aren't feeling or holding pain. And I got to be with the story of those photos. What was happening in that? And so that can lead to where we can start to give space and time to individuals to start working versus can we get it done now? Because that might be an agenda set in us to see healing for the person, which is, it has a good intent, but what's the impact when we rush someone to their healing? Versus what does it look like for them to sit in story and notice what story is coming? Is it a story that's, I'm just trying to get you out of my face? Or are we really opening up a space and allowing for that to come and then for them to see, even in the meditation, can you see it? Nobody said anything out loud. Nobody put their story out there, but that story was an internal remembrance. And then can you see what the kindness looks like too? So that's my offering for love.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. And I really love what Reverend Margaret's talking about in terms of, again, back to the being with where people are, and really not trying to change that. I think as someone who spends a lot more time in progressive contexts where we're looking at progress, we want to see progress. That's great. And sometimes our attachment to progress in a certain way, in a certain idea of it, can actually block us from being with somebody in front of us and what's alive for them. And so this model is a way of even allowing those where people are to not try to change that at all, but to really be a companion and a presence there. And when I think of people who go through lots of different experiences, but may feel too idealized or too romanticized to experience some kind of original state of goodness or something like that. Like even the smallest invitation to invite an awareness around moments that may feel connecting to a person, as simple as coloring, as simple as moments in nature, as simple as feeling the wind. I mean, I don't know, every person has their own experience, but to be curious about if there are micro, very small deposits, and just to wonder what that feels like with people, I think is one piece. And I don't think a lot of people, at least that I've been in conversation with, it's like we experience some of these things, but they just pass us. We don't allow them to really deposit into us. right? And so these micro moments of kind of connection, of kind of companionship that we might feel in our experience, we just miss them because we just kind of fly by them. But the text from a friend who says, you were on my heart today. Like, what a gift that somebody would take, even if it's 5 seconds, to say, you are on my heart today, but to invite a deepened attention to the fact that you received that text today. And how we start to build some awareness around our experience. That's one thing. And then I think the other piece is, and this is a little bit like it feels tender inside, but you know, this growing capacity that we build collectively. I'm not talking, I mean, personally we experience it, but collectively, to not look away and not turn away when things are happening. There's something that's happening in that, even though like on one hand, it's really terrifying and horrific and almost like feels impossible to bear, right? As we are coming into that space for ourselves and with one another and with the support of the divine, the ancestors, the earth as a larger body, as we're feeling our way into those experiences and as we're with them, something is happening. I'm not sure that we can always fully get to whatever outcome, but when we're opening up that rhythm, that movement together in that, it feels like something is really shifting. At least that's been part of my experience in wanting to support and my own life and those in my context, who it's hard to imagine connecting to something life affirming. And so this kind of heartbrokenness and you know, like the kind of energy of sorrows that's still part of an alchemical spiritual movement and how we support each other. And that feels important to also normalize and lift up in some of these challenges.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot wait to continue these conversations with you all in a month or so, a little over a month. This has just been everything that I didn't know that I needed today to be in conversation with you all and to be reading the chat that has been happening. I love I love that the Nurture the Soul chat is alive and well every week. There's a lot of community resourcing that happens in there. And so really excited for that. And I just want to thank you, Margaret and Aizaiah, for both of your thought labor, your soul labor, your heart labor that goes into caring for the wider church, the world at large, and for our babies and for our loved ones. I want to thank you so very, very much for your time today. And for you all for joining us, whether you're here live or you're watching it later. If this webinar has touched you, we hope that you share it with somebody. I already know I'm going to be sending it to my therapist afterwards, so really excited for this. So we'll get the recording of this webinar to you within 72 hours. Margaret and them will share their information with me. So that way, if you want to reach out to me, you just reply to the email invite that you got for today's webinar, and I will put you in connection, or I will connect you to them. And we'll connect you to some other resources. But we really do hope that you join us in October. It's going to be a wonderful practice. And we all had talked about how long 3 hours is to be on Zoom, but there's going to be a lot of movement work involved in it. There's going to be some writing, some reflecting, and what Reverend Dr. Aizaiah had said is there's going to be conversation. And so it'll be a wonderful spirit-filled time. And those links will be in that email and in chat now. But we hope that you join us for our next webinar next Thursday, September 4th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our next installment of our Future of Faith series. In the times of social, political, and economic crisis, we need new ways to think about morality and ethics to make sure that our ethical approaches serve the moment and compel us into a just and healing action. Sociologist, liturgist, and sacred music composer Amanda Eudice Kessler offers us a new way of thinking about ethics that is consonant with the commitments of progressive Christianity that help us to follow Jesus in times of violence, in times of cruelty, and corruption. Let me tell you, Amanda and I just met earlier this week. We had this conversation before the inauguration and what has since happened. And so this is, I guarantee, next week is going to be a continuing rich conversation to join us. So we hope to see you next week, and then also we'll be touching a little bit on their book here, Abundant Lives, which is available through Pilgrim Press. Blessings to each of you, but I'm going to turn it over to the Reverend Dr. Aizaiah to send us out. Thank you both, Margaret and Aizaiah, for everything.
Well, Holy One of many names and beyond all names, thank you for meeting us in this time together. Thank you for the spirits of life, the cosmic spirits, the spirits of the sky, the earth, the waters, the fire that support us, the ancestral wisdom that has been passed on to us that we've received. And thank you for this invitation to show up as we are today in fullness, with the heartbreak, with the challenge, with the struggle, with the joy, with the delight. Thank you that we have connection with others today. Those on this call, those who will watch this call later, that we are not in this by ourselves, but we're in this together. Strengthen our bonds of connection. Allow us to be instruments of peace, of transformation, and of healing in the movement towards and for wholeness, so that all of life may be enriched. And so it is. Go in peace.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.